has started to move over. Cool. And then you look and it's still moving, and we get to this little red area here. And this red area here is what we call extreme temperatures, ones that aren't really compatible for life. And now this is what we're at the last 20 years. And so when we talk about global warming, it's not that we don't still get cold, and it's not that we don't still get regular temperatures, but that whole bell curve is just sort of creeping its way up the line. So where it was hot, it's just going to get hotter more often. And where it's mild, it's going to be hotter more often and less mild, and so on and so forth. So the whole bell curve is just moving up. And as we see, the same thing here, this is an explanation of the global surface temperatures we've got going on right here. This is what we're looking at, is it was a little bit below, it's popped up, and now we're just sort of climbing up again as the departure from the average keeps rising. The thing, this is actually not true. I believe 2020 was the hottest year on record. Was that true, Bill? Yeah. So unsurprisingly, 2020 was the hottest year on record. The thing that worries people now is that the heat brings a lot of other bad things with it. So 19 of the 20 hottest years have occurred since 2001. The last 5 have all been the hottest. So it's not an aberration. It's sort of like the new normal. It's just getting hotter. Oh, this is my favorite heat wave. So in Australia last year, we all know that they had a lot of fires, but we also didn't really hear about the heat of it. And my sister lives in Canberra, and she called me and said that the Australian government had to come up with a new color for their heat maps because it was so hot that the color they used for each 10-degree step, they had to find another one. So like the super hottest color now in Australia is actually like purple, I think, because they'd already used red. And of course, Australia had not only a new all-time high record, this is their Capitol building right here, but it also had those horrible forest fires that everybody saw. And hotter years normally have fires. As everyone remembers from last year, we not only had a pandemic of COVID, but we also had a pandemic of fires. It was the worst forest fire year ever in California. And there's a direct correlation and probably a causation between temperatures and forest fires. So if you look at the average temperatures in the Western United States, and the higher the temperature, often the less precipitation. So not only is it hotter, it's drier. Because of that, we're very likely getting a lot of fires. And so everyone remembers last year when we were surrounded by fires. Like my friends were like, well, where will you go? And I was like, we're literally surrounded. I have to walk into the bay if this becomes a problem, because we're just surrounded by forest fires. And not only are we getting more forest fires, but the length of the forest fire season is almost twice as long as it used to be. And last year when we had all the fires, it was actually before the official fire season started. And so again, there's a concern this year that we're going to face similar problems with the fire season increasingly getting longer every year, as well as more severe. Well, members pictures from Napa County, rest of California. Now, going with the heat pandemic not only causes more fires, it's also causing ice melting. And so we have a picture here of a glacier in Greenland. And we just want to say, all right, so what's going on with the glacier in Greenland? This is what it looks like as of 2013. And so as it heats up, ice is melting, sea levels are rising. But right now we're just talking about Greenland, but this is also happening in the Arctic as well, is that it's just losing tons and tons of ice. And there was actually one day last year where it lost 12.5 million tons of ice in one day. And so I think 2/3 of Greenland is actively melting right now. So we talk about Arctic ice loss. This is another pandemic we're facing. Oh no, is a pandemic of ice loss. So pandemic of heat, pandemic of diseases, and a lot of ice loss. Now this is a problem because ice reflects heat. So if it's white, it reflects 85% of the heat back into space. However, water absorbs and traps 93% of the heat that it absorbs. So the more exposed water we have, the hotter the planet's going to keep getting. And all of this sort of contributes to more weather catastrophes. It's hotter, there's more fires, there's more water, there's actually more humidity in the air for each degree that goes up. It's actually every degree that the ocean temperature goes up, it's 8% more humid in storms, and the more water storms have, the worse they are. And so if we look at the worldwide extreme weather catastrophes, you can see from 1980 till now, there's a very there's a noticeable rise. And I love this graph because it's actually done by Munich Re, which is a reinsurance company. So it's the company that insures the insurance companies. So they're not worried about, the ethics or morality or conservation of climate change. They're worried about the money. And the way that they're looking at this is they're saying this is a definite trend that we need to pay attention to. And so I agree with this right here. The next pandemic I want to talk about is the pandemic of environmental justice, or injustice, as we say, because the people who are most impacted by climate change are the least able to deal with it. So mostly first world countries have contributed to climate change, the United States and Europe. However, the people who are most impacted are often either frontline communities, communities of color, or developing countries and poor communities. In the United States, it's the same case. So this is what we've got in New Jersey. They've had big floods there. They've also had floods here in New Orleans, Louisiana. And in the United States, flooding disproportionately impacts Black or African American neighborhoods. And of the counties in the United States that are most vulnerable to disaster, and that's both flooding as well as fire, as well as drought, 81% of the people in these counties are minorities on average. And this is Texas. So Texas is obviously a very diverse place. And this is actually Texas on the same day. So it's Houston off to your left. And this was when Houston got a foot of rain in a little over a day. And it was not a foot, sorry, 5 feet of rain. And so it was basically every hour, something equivalent to Niagara Falls was falling on the Houston area. And on the other side of the state, obviously they've got severe drought. And so even in one location, you've got one or the other. And climate change is also a medical emergency. This is the next pandemic we're talking about. COVID as well as other options. Right now we've got tropical diseases on the move. So if you look, a lot of tropical diseases that were sort of stuck in the equatorial belt, now that it becomes warmer and the air becomes more moist, it's able to move up north and it's able to move south. So I remember back when West Nile was first introduced to the United States, and everyone was like, oh, well, it won't stick around. And now West Nile is very common. Lyme disease is another one, Chagas disease, all of these diseases that didn't have the ability to live in a lot of these areas are now moving both north and south. And not only are they not able to live there, but they're actually adapting. And so now we've also got things like Zika. And this is just to point out that every year, 5 new zoological diseases emerge. And they're called zoologic diseases because they come from animals. COVID-19 is probably one of them. We don't know exactly where COVID-19 came from, but the expectation is that it came from an animal market somewhere in Wuhan, China, and it jumped from animals to people. This is the same thing that happened with SARS, same thing that happens with Ebola. And so as the human population gets driven further and further into wild environments, become in contact with more animals, or as we use these animals for food, we're much more likely to come into contact with more of these diseases. All right, in addition to pandemics of disease, the air pollution is making those diseases worse. And so I'm not making light of the people who've lost their lives to COVID-19, but every year 9 million people die due to ambient air pollution. So it's a very significant number. And not only do they die to that, people with COVID-19 are more likely to die if they're exposed to air pollution. This is back to our pandemic of social justice. If you're African American, you're much more likely to die from COVID-19 than any other group. Actually, that was the case. I actually looked up a new one and it switched around, and now it's Indigenous Americans are actually the highest rate. I believe in the Navajo Nation, you're 7 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than if you're not a member of the Navajo Nation. And one of the reasons this is people in the Navajo Nation or African Americans most often live in places with poor environmental controls and poor air quality. Oh yeah, this is a picture of Shiprock here. All right, on to the good news. So we know that we've got pandemics of diseases, fires, ice melting, global warming, but in 2015, there was the Paris Agreement where the entire world said, hey, we've got to work to get to net zero by mid-century. We all know the United States pulled out of that. Well, we're back into it. We used to have this one, but it was before the actual election where we said there's actually a 4-year cooling off period. And so as soon as President Biden got in, he signed his intention to go back into the Paris Agreement. And I believe we're now back into the Paris Agreement. But even before then, half of the United States was already going to be part of what we called the United States Climate Alliance and have been pursuing the Paris Agreement even outside of the structure of the United States. And so people are pushing towards that. And this is to show that change is really possible. This is a Kentucky Coal Mining Museum, and they installed solar because they realized that putting solar on the coal mining museum would save them $8,000 to $10,000 per year. And so we know it's bad, but this is to show you that change is possible. If the Kentucky Coal Mining Museum can go to solar, anyone can make the transition. So when we talk about New Deals, I'm going to talk about the Green New Deal, which I'm sure people have all heard about. It was being bandied about last year. And I'm also going to talk about how the Green New Deal compares to, I believe it's called the American Jobs Plan or the American Recovery Plan put together by the Biden administration. They are similar, but they are not the same. And so we have 12 years from now, or 10 at this point, to cut emissions in half. Question is, how can we do this? And so I always ask this question. A catchphrase that has been used a lot is people say, well, we need to act like our house is on fire. Well, I don't know about you, but if my house is on fire, I'm leaving my house. But what do you do if your house is on fire and you can't leave? Now, without being defeatist, don't go hide in the closet. Think to yourself, all right, well then how do I put out the fire? I'm gonna turn on the faucet. I'm gonna do something to try and save the rest of the house. And so this is what we're going to be doing to save our house. So what is the Green New Deal? The Green New Deal is actually not legislation. It's a collection of policy ideas and ideologies that sort of outline a future legislation. And it's focused on jobs and justice that center around decarbonization within the United States economy. It is in line with the scientific consensus in the IPCC scientific report. So the Green New Deal was announced by AOC as well as it's a senator from New England whose name escapes me. But they announced their intention to promote this last year in February. The Green New Deal has 5 goals. First is to achieve net zero through fair and just transition, and they will ensure this transition by creating a bunch of good high-wage jobs by decarbonizing the current economy. And so what they would do is invest in infrastructure and in industry in the United States that would go towards decarbonizing buildings, creating massive public transportation infrastructure, and cleaning up existing coal and power sites. They would also secure clean air and water and focus on community resilience, which means decentralizing a lot of these functions. And they would promote justice and equity by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppression of frontline and vulnerable communities. This is the Green New Deal. This is not Biden's American Jobs Plan. I'll tell you about the differences and similarities. So quickly talking about jobs, the first argument people get is, oh, you can't just create jobs in the green economy. You actually absolutely can. Over the last 5 years, solar energy jobs are growing 5 times faster than the overall economy. This does not account for 2020, which of course all jobs did not grow very much. Also, these jobs are often very high paying and low skilled. So we cannot solve the climate crisis without addressing the economic system that encourages the exploitation of both people and the environment. Infinite growth is unequal and unsustainable. Now, we've actually known this for a long time, and we've known that our extractive sort of focus on the economy of sort of extract, consume, and then discard is not sustainable on our planet, particularly for our population size. And so, blah, 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 more jobs. Oh, yes, lots of jobs. So the Green New Deal focuses on what is sometimes called a new economic system. The ones in green are the ones that the Biden administration is enacting. The ones in white are ones that are part of the Green New Deal. So the whole thing is what the Green New Deal recommends, but the ones that are in green are the ones that are actually being implemented by Biden's new plan. So President Biden said he was going to invest several $1 trillion in modernizing the economy by decarbonizing it. That includes his statement that all of our federal trucks and cars are going to be switched over to electric vehicles, that he's going to do massive infrastructure investment for public transportation, rebuild roads and schools, as well as retrofit homes for being more environmentally friendly. It's going to focus on restoration instead of exploitation. This is a very good thing. Restoration would be things like cleaning up Superfund sites. And fun fact for those of us that live in Santa Clara County, Santa Clara County has the most Superfund sites of any county in the United States. We have 23. I can walk to 7 of them from where I'm sitting right now. And of these Superfund sites, all of the ones around me are susceptible to sea level rise. So as the sea level rises, the toxins kept in these Superfund sites are going to start bubbling up. So I'm really excited about the focus on the restoration instead of exploitation. Guaranteed work is part of the Green New Deal. It is not part of Biden's plan, but this is an aspect of it. Living wages. Often this could be seen as raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Otherwise, it would also be considered, paying wages for previously non-paid work like childcare or elder care. And then the Green New Deal focuses on a new social contract. Right now, what we call the social contract in the United States doesn't really exist anymore. It was back sort of in our parents' generation or my parents' generation when it was, someone had the same jobs for 30 years and then they retired with a pension. And if you got a good education and you worked hard, then you would be socially secure. Right now, with the gig economy and the lack of benefits and whatnot, the social contract has sort of fallen apart. This new social contract would reach out and essentially create a social safety net for people so that guarantees like healthcare, things that were not provided by work, would be again covered by the government. Not part of Biden's plan. Circular economic model. This is a thing that is not covered extensively in President Biden's plan, but is hinted at. And basically that means we would need to go from taking raw materials, design, manufacture, distribution, consumption, and throwing it away to repair, reuse, or recycle, recover materials. And this can be anything from reusing glass bottles. Plastic is a bad example, so I wouldn't say you can recycle plastic. Or I've seen it now where they're deconstructing old homes. So you have old homes that got like nice hardwood, but they're not really livable. They hire crews to go in, deconstruct these homes, and then reuse the pieces of the deconstructed homes in other sorts of building things. So you're not throwing out old oak boards and nice things like that. And so it's the thought of basically reduce, reuse, recycle, but for an entire economic model. All right, creating new jobs with the Green New Deal project. So these jobs, as part of the Green New Deal, would pay a living wage. Again, that's the $15 minimum wage. And this is part of it, is establish a national smart grid or public transportation infrastructure. That is part of Biden's plan. Build, renew zero emissions energy sources, also part of Biden's plan. So this is all things that are happening now or being focused to happen. The President Biden's plan did say he was going to spend 40% of the financial investment from this American Jobs Plan on what we call frontline or vulnerable populations. Those are the ones I outlined earlier. It would be minorities or those that are most likely to be facing climate change. All right, for those of you that are interested, there's a great book called The Great Pivot. It's actually written by a Santa Clara University professor called Justine Burt, where she discusses specifically how green jobs can be used to integrate the economy. She also sort of ties it together, I'm not running out of time, with what we call the value of work. There's what we call a crisis in work right now, or what we call I hate to say this, the pandemic of disenfranchisement with work, where 40% of people feel like their job actually has no value, that it doesn't contribute anything to society. And so there's a big sort of disenfranchisement and a big sort of like lack of engagement with work, more so than previous in human history. And her argument in this book is that we can use one pandemic to solve another. So we can take the pandemic of work disengagement, work dissatisfaction, and turn those into engagement with meaningful jobs, green jobs that will help restore the environment. So it's a 2-for-1 win. It's a really well-written book, so I highly recommend it. All right, combating inequality. The key premise of both Biden's plan and the Green New Deal is that because climate change does not impact everyone equally, solutions to it cannot be distributed equally. They must be distributed as needs basis. And so it will focus on frontline communities, those that will be directly or have been directly impacted by environmental degradation and climate change. This includes retraining fossil fuel workers, which apparently we could retrain all of the coal workers in the United States for $2 billion, which I know sounds like a lot, but when you look at the costs of climate change, it's actually a very minimal amount. It also focuses on unionization and labor movements, which is part of Biden's plan. This part for combating inequality also focuses on Medicare for all and education for all. I know that these are under discussion in our current administration, but they are not part of Biden's new plan. But it's a thought of taking all of these social contract things that have sort of fallen by the wayside and incorporating them as a way to equalize communities and help them address climate change and problems because of climate change. what the Green New Deal isn't, and I love answering these questions, it is not socialism. And I know you hear this all the time from a lot of very conservative people. The Green New Deal is not socialism. In fact, the New Deal back in the 1930s was much closer to socialism than the current Green New Deal is. The Green New Deal, as well as Biden's plan, is very decentralized. It focuses on community-based solutions. So the investment goes directly to the community. The control over the investment is directly from the community, and it is organized from the community outwards. So we're talking about things like microgrids. Microgrids are a school getting solar panels and batteries so that it's sort of self-contained and it doesn't have to worry about the electricity grid going down like it happens to happen here a lot in California. And it's very much a local thing. It is not controlled at all by the central government. So it's the exact opposite. And it does not place limitations on who owns what. A lot of the development going on for the Green New Deal or Biden's plan is very much private sector focused. So it's not socialism. Another thing it is not an instant fix. People would just like climate change to be fixed. Trust me, I would love climate change to be fixed. Unfortunately, the New Deal, which was to resolve the Great Depression, took over a decade. And it also took a lot of trial and error. The New Deal trialed some things that didn't work. They failed and they failed forward and they had to keep going. The same will happen. Also, the New Deal was a bit uneven in that it helped mostly white men. It left out people of color and it left out women. Whereas the Green New Deal is actually focusing the opposite way, and it's focusing on marginalized communities. But again, it's never been done before. So even with Biden's plan, the expectation is it will take a while, probably a long time. It took us 100 years to get into this situation, so it's probably gonna take us a little while to get out. And these efforts will have to be trialed, and there will be learning from it. And another thing is it's not impossible. I've also heard it from people who say, well, it's just too much change. It's just too hard. We can't do this. But the United States and many other countries have had numerous instances of rapid social economic transition. We had it with the invention of the automobile. We had it World War I. We had it after the Great Depression with the New Deal, World War II, the oil shocks of the 1970s. And this last year with COVID, the whole world has changed the way that we do things within a year. And it hasn't been easy, but we've managed. And so I don't believe that it's impossible just because it's going to be different. Also, societies and economic systems are mutable, which means they can be changed. And we are in a position right now where change is very much possible because our norm has been disrupted. And if we want to go back to a new normal, now is a good opportunity to do so. All right, and I say why now. This is my one moment of political science geekery, and I can't help it. So this is something I got from George Leahy, who is a Quaker sort of environmental activist. And he says, if you look at institutions, they're sort of like, history gives us opportunities for large changes when there's conflict. And so when we look at some of the biggest conflicts, and I'm talking about social and economic conflicts, I'm talking about the Great Depression, I'm talking about 1969 and that era. We had, say in 1969, we had the Vietnam War, we had a lot of social conflict. We also had a lot of inequality between races and classes, and that causes friction. It causes friction between social components, between ethnic components, and that friction causes what we say is sort of like political heat. And political heat makes institutions flexible. And when institutions are flexible, they are ready and prepared to be changed. And so right now we're seeing the most inequality between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots since the 1920s. So we've got a lot of that friction that way. We are seeing a reckoning along racial divides. We're seeing a reckoning along political divides. And so there's a lot of political heat in the United States right now, and it is a really good opportunity to take that heat and focus it towards something positive. And so when we say, it's going to be a hard change, now is a great time. It's a literal strike while the iron is hot opportunity here. And so here's where we get to the what can you do? So we know that there's an issue. We know that there's sort of like federal level solutions coming down, but the federal government can't do everything. And I always say you're responsible for one person's actions. You're responsible for your own actions. So what could your own actions do? Just to point out to you, like I know there's a lot of what we call environmental anxiety. And I found this cool graph of the top 10 fears of people in the United States. And if you look at them, the blue ones are all related to the environment. So half of the top 10 fears in the United States are people worried about environmental things, pollution or so on and so forth. And some of the other things are sort of correlated with a poor environment. And so, you're not the only ones. So I want you to know that you are not the only people who are concerned about this, and that there's definitely something you can do. You're not alone. And I wanted to point out 2 instances of where one person made a huge difference. So on the right, we all know that's Greta Thunberg. And in 2019, she did her like solo climate strike for the environment. And this is actually her in New York Times Square in front of several 100,000 people, where she started that global climate movement. And now she's a 17-year-old, young woman from Sweden, and she's had a massive impact. The picture on the left, and it's actually my favorite, is a picture in the front yard of a lady who, she's an immigrant from Russia, and she thought prior to the previous election, she was like, I'm really concerned with the way the United States is going, and so I'm gonna start a meetup group and just say anyone who wants to write letters to voters and get them registered to vote can come through me. And this sort of rolled on and on and on. And by the time the election rolled around, she and a bunch of volunteers had written over 100,000, it was about 120,000 letters to voters in Georgia and Florida, encouraging them to vote. And as we see from how it turned out in Georgia, I believe what they did made a difference. And this was just one lady, and she spent months organizing letters and these campaigns with people, and she really did make a difference. Now, we don't have time to do this, but I want to let you know that the option is there. Now, we all think, okay, I voted last year, I don't need to vote anymore. 1 in 4 people aren't registered to vote, and let me tell you, your vote has a lot of weight in local elections. And local elections happen every single year. And Al Gore says this: it is better to change legislation than light bulbs, because one light bulb is nice. Legislating a new kind of light bulb is even better. And so these are my examples of why you should vote. So we have the tragic tale of Kevin Ency. He was a police officer in a small rural community, and he was trying to become sheriff, and sheriff is an elected position. And so out of like 11,500 votes cast, he lost by 1. And he found out that he lost by 1 because one of his reserve officers forgot to mail his ballot and left it on his kitchen table. We had the tale of 2 delegates, the Virginia House of Delegates. I'm trying to remember if this is the one where, I believe this is the one where they tied, and they ended up determining who won by pulling the name out of a jar. And the reason it was so important was because they had tied 4 years earlier and also resolved it by pulling the name out of a jar, and it had gone the other direction. And so both times it was a fluke. And the last one that I think is most relevant is democracy by ping pong ball. So we had, again, 2 people, and this was in, I believe, Wyoming, facing each other, and it came up as a tie. And so what they did live on USA Today was, I think the state mayor wrote both their names on ping pong balls and pulled the name out of his cowboy hat. And that determined who won the election. And I really feel like democracy should not be determined by ping pong ball. And what was made even more sort of horrifying by this was the person who won gave that party control over the House, and that person became Speaker of the House. And that was all by 1 vote. And I'm sure there was some person in that electorate who was like, it's a minor election. My vote doesn't matter. Especially, a lot of these it was 2,000, 3,000 votes. It's not a lot of votes, so your vote really does weigh a lot. And we also should just talk about it. I know we all sort of live in our own little bubbles just because you hang out with people you agree with, and we sort of assume that everyone thinks like we do. Until all of a sudden you have a conversation. And so even though people know about climate change, 81% of people say that they haven't actually discussed it with anyone in the last year. And the best way to put it on the table is to bring it up. Just have a conversation. It doesn't need to be, aggressive. It's just be like, what do you guys think about this? And sort of get people thinking about it. Another option is write an op-ed in a newspaper, especially a local newspaper. San Jose got the San Jose Spotlight. There's the Mercury News. There's a bunch of local ethnic newspapers. If you've got an opinion, you have something to say, these papers are always happy to hear from their readers. Write it and say that this is what I'm thinking about, this is what I'm concerned, or attend a protest safely and social distancing until it's safe otherwise. So you can also do virtual protests, but I want to remind everyone that dissent is an essential component of democracy. And so in order to have a good democracy, there has to be a shared sort of discussion of opinions, and we're allowed to disagree with each other. Also, I say here, think global, start local. start in your workplace. Luckily, we're in Silicon Valley, and a lot of places, much like San Jose State, has people focused on sustainability. Thank you, Bill. But many of my climate reality leaders say that, they started working, and my friend Seema was working someplace and everyone was using these plastic disposable cups. And she's like, I can't deal with this giant pile of disposable cups at the end of every single workday. And so she started a green team, and the green team went around and, got everybody mugs that they could use for water. And from there, it turned into, now we want solar power. So if you can, start at work or start at your city council. I have conveniently provided a picture of the San Jose City Council chambers for you. You can go and speak at any city council meeting that's open to the public. And so if they have a bill up that concerns you or is about the environment, or you don't think they have enough bills about the environment or about climate change, you have the opportunity to go and just say your piece. And I encourage you to do so, because not a lot of people do. And so what you say really does matter. You can go to the school board and discuss what curriculums you want your child or your families or your friends to be covering, and whether or not you want their buildings run by green energy. County level, the turnout for county elections is very, very low. And often a lot of elected seats actually go empty. They go unfilled because nobody has run for them. This includes things for like water board and oversight boards. And there's all sorts of boards that need representation. So run for office. There are a ton of opportunities to run for office. I'm mindful of time here. And there's actually a lot of places that will teach you how to do that. People say, I don't know how to run for office. You don't need to know how to run for office, because there's organizations for every spectrum that I can provide for you, or that in these slides that we can send out later, that will tell you how to do it, and they will train you for free on how to run for office. So it isn't about numbers, it's about showing up, being enthusiastic, and actually just saying something. Being present is very, very important. All right, another thing, if you want to go state, then you're lucky that you live in a state that is very, very influential in politics. California is very large, and often other states copy our legislation. And I'm not kidding, like they literally take it word for word from our legislation and adopt it at their state level. Very few constituents that reach out to their state legislators. All you have to do is go online and Google who are my state representatives, and they will give you a link, and you can call them or write them an email and say, this is how I feel on this particular bill, or I'm concerned about this issue. If you are an expert on any of these particular issues, they may actually reach out and ask you for input. I know I work with several people who have a background in conservation, and their legislator, once they know that you're interested in an issue, will actually reach out to you and be like, give me more information on this. There's also a particular time on the legislative calendar when you can actually propose legislation to your legislator, and you may actually get a bill in that you actually thought of and started yourself. So these are also opportunities for you to reach out. Or if legislation is not your thing, there's an organization for everybody. You're a big fan of invertebrates, Xerxes Society. Big fan of polar bears, NERDAC. The Environmental Voter Project was a project I was involved in. Now, I love environmentalists. I hang with them a bunch. They are horrible at voting. Something like 7% of people who identify as environmentalists vote, which is ridiculously low. So you can reach out to voters. Big fan of turtles. There's something for you. You're always welcome to join the Climate Reality Project. The training is free, and we're always happy to have you. Or just celebrate one day. We've got Earth Day coming up. Celebrate Earth Day this year and talk to some people about climate change. You can go as big or as little as you want. I'm going to skip the direct action, but this is George Lakey. This is the Quaker I was telling you about. I think he's 81 or 82 in this photo, and he's being taken out of a Capitol building somewhere for being arrested. Basically, he started an environmental movement when he was a professor, and his students, they went and saw what they called mountaintop removal mining, where they go out in the Appalachians and they literally remove the top of a mountain, dig out all of the resources, and then just leave the area really quite denuded. And his students were like, well, we have to do something. And he was like, well, we're a tiny little college and we're a bunch of Quakers. What should we do? And so they actually thought, well, we can't directly confront these people. And they actually figured out the bank that was funding the mountaintop removal and staged non-violent protests where they would just go sit in the lobbies of the banks and inform patrons what the bank was funding, and then allied with a bunch of other companies or a bunch of other movements. So across the nation, they would have these sort of sit-ins at banks where they would just sit down and sort of like have die-ins discussing what this was happening. And they actually got the banks to divest from the mountaintop removal projects, and the project stopped because they could no longer get financing. So if you're interested in that, he has a book called How We Win, which is a good way to look at direct action. So in summary, if you are interested in addressing environmental issues and climate change, use your voice, speak up, use your vote, especially at the local level, and use your choices, because your economic choices also have power, and speak truth to power like your world depends on it, because it does. All right, and that is the end of the presentation. So I would love to entertain people's questions or comments or anything like that. Bill, did you have anything like that?
Yeah, I have a question, Erin. You know, you talked about inequality, racial inequality, wealth inequality, impact of climate change inequality, COVID inequality. And that has, to me, has caused a lot of tensions, especially racial tensions, to elevate to the surface. How do you see this all playing out? Is that a good thing, a bad thing?
Is this from you specifically or somebody else?
That's for me.
Okay. I think it's something that has to happen. Really, like, I get frustrated when people say this has made racism worse. It has not made racism worse. It has made racism public. Mm-hmm. And I believe that these are conversations we have to have with ourselves and with our communities and with our legislators. And we need to acknowledge that in my case, I have been very privileged. I have been privileged to not be subjected to a lot of negative environmental consequences, and other people have not had that kind of privilege. And I do sort of have an obligation to either speak up for those people, or better yet, amplify those people's voices and give them a seat at the table, because I want to live in a society where everybody gets not just equality, but equity, which means that even if we're not starting from the same position, we still have the same opportunities.
Great. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anybody want to raise their hand? That's also an allowable way of asking questions.
I was going to say,
for students, especially.
You can't tell me that the Green New Deal, everyone's just like, yeah, okay, sure. Are there opinions on the Green New Deal? Because I would like to see what people think about that. Is it a good idea? Is it not a good idea? Is it too much? Is it not enough? Because I have opinions, but
it sounds like not enough people understand what the Green New Deal is about. I was looking at all the posters. I was thinking those are really awesome. Yet they do also call up images of the New Deal. And so as a communicator, I think about how can we get the message out, what this actually is, to the right audiences, to the audiences who don't know and who are maybe scared of it.
Mm-hmm. And I was torn because I saw those posters and I was like, man, that is fabulous art. But it does sort of like,
I want them all.
it harkens back to what happened in the 1930s. And I thought, you know, people think that it's socialism when it is literally the exact opposite. And they don't get that. And I know that the current administration, I know Democrats have really sort of gone away from just using the term, the Green New Deal, because the term just turns people off. It's much like Obamacare. So people stopped using Obamacare and they started using the Affordable Care Act. And people started to perceive it differently. Oh, well, of course, affordability is good. So the reason they call it like the American Recovery Plan or the American Jobs Plan is because you can't use the term green and make it politically palatable to a broad spectrum. So you're absolutely right. And I do like how they sort of like picked the most socially and politically expedient aspects of it. And I'd be interested to see, are they going to take this and roll this into, you know, momentum towards more things, or like they're fighting the $15 minimum wage thing as a separate part of the Green New Deal. But this is still the most comprehensive environmental plan to ever come out of any US administration. And it's really good news. And it will be really good news for the Bay Area because they want to invest very heavily in technology and frontline communities, of which we have both. And so it's exciting. I know the environmentalist movement sort of felt like we were taking 2 steps back over the last 4 years, but the Trump administration was sort of pulling back a lot of limitations on environmental protections and whatnot. And now there's sort of a reversal. But if you come up with a good way to communicate the Green New Deal, let me know.
Well, I think it got off to a lot of bad press, originally. The Republicans really kind of tore it up and down. And, and I don't think anybody realized, and you made a point of it earlier, it's not law. Green New Deal is a guideline. It's a guideline to here's where we'd like to get to at some point. And we need to create laws that might implement that. So, but, it was approached as if, oh, this is going to become a law and, and
a whole new governing system.
Right,
and
right.
It was supported by, like AOC is she's a very visible figure in this, and she is a democratic socialist.
Right.
And
they started becoming inextricable in Green New Deal.
And very polarizing. And again, people hear the word socialism and lose their minds, which drives me crazy, because I've also seen them use terms like socialism, Marxism, and fascism as interchangeable, which they're not. They're absolutely not. And so there's, again, I think a communication issue with that as well. And it's also just, it's so broad that they're just like, what does this mean? It's the same with like people, oh, it's not neoliberalism. Well, neoliberalism is a bunch of ideologies to form legislation. It's also not a policy. And people get that nuance confused. I see a new face. Annette, did you have a question? Or do you just want to smile?
No, I just said I was here. Been a lot of things going on. My daughter's getting married April 24th, and
oh wow,
congratulations.
Bunch of wine got dropped off, and we were tasting it. And sorry.
Oh darn.
Yeah, sorry. We're all here together to take care of that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations, Annette. I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad. Well, it's Earth Month. You do all know that Earth Day was founded by an SJSU alum, Gaylord Nelson. Okay, good.
I did not know that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he graduated in well, he went on to become governor and senator from Wisconsin, but Gaylord Nelson. It was a big deal founding in the 1970s, though it was also controversial how they were celebrating on campus, because students decided they would bury a brand new Ford Maverick. And African-American students protested, saying, well, you're totally ignorant of that people are in poverty. And it was a letter went off to the governor. It was really a big deal. But they had this celebration of survival fair. Eventually, they had to dig up the Maverick because it was leaking oil. I've still never found an alum. I give a lot of tours, history tours of the campus, including of alums. I've never heard anybody say what happened to the car after they dug it up and did something with it. It actually got written up by an environmental book by Barry Commoner, who had run for president, I think against Jimmy Carter, where he gave that as an example of poor environmental activity because you're ignoring social issues. And if you're doing that, you're not going to be successful in your environmental measures. So he really gave us a bad mark. And you mentioned San Jose State having done that activity of burying the car, but not realizing
that's a great point. Because I think one big thing that people miss is that you cannot untangle environmental justice and social justice.
Yeah, and that's what Barry Commoner wrote about because in a couple of books.
Yeah, and even the Climate Reality Project was like way behind. Like it was only, I think, last year that the Climate Reality Project was like, we're going to tuck in social justice with the rest of our environmental justice thing, because again, it's like people who suffer the most are the ones who are least likely to have caused the problem. And if everyone's on board, then all of a sudden you can't take advantage of another group if everyone has a seat at that table.
Yeah. And I think obviously just with the Green New Deal, as long as you've got a bunch of people denying science, that's a pretty big deal. I guess I hate to say, sounds political, but I guess until Mar-a-Lago gets washed away, people aren't gonna maybe buy into that. Maybe this is a problem.
Well, and I hate to say this, but this last year with the pandemic, with the fires, with the extreme temperatures, I at least have seen a reduction in overt climate denial. Because even if people are denying the fact that it's caused by people, that we're in the Anthropocene, that this is the only time that humans have been strong enough to change our, people still have to acknowledge that the climate is changing. And regardless of the source of that change, we need to adapt to it. So you can at least get them onto the adaptation bandwagon, if not so much the decarbonization bandwagon. But I've seen a little bit less of that recently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope we should have obviously got involved years ago with the Kyoto Protocol more actively, because this is the source of jobs, and it's just puzzling why they want these jobs to go elsewhere, so far as designing and building this new technology. But my background is actually tax work. And the tax law is a good example of how we don't know what we're doing, because we have incentives in there for alternative energy. We still have incentives in there for oil and gas.
Well, the subsidies for oil and gas are astronomical. Like the cheapest options for energy right now by far are wind and solar. And it's only the subsidies that even make oil and gas competitive at this point. And I think we would have transitioned much, much more quickly if those subsidies didn't exist.
Right. Right. Yeah. And they're not going anywhere. I don't ever see it in
Oh, they're very
proposals to get rid of them.
politically popular.
Obama had,
Yeah.
talked about phasing some of those out, but
And Biden is as
Republicans
well.
can, yeah.
Well, but Biden is also talking about phasing out subsidies for oil and gas and not supporting new development of infrastructure, just because it's a bad investment at this point. It's just not, economically a good idea to invest in these sources of energy anymore.
Yeah. And I think certainly for GM to say they're going to, yes, they're going to do something. That's what it takes. I mean, at some point, I guess they were going to realize, move forward or get left behind. And there's no guarantee, you can get bailed out again when things go wrong. So that's a positive to see that.
Yeah, GM and Ford both. Ford also jumped into the bandwagon about, going all electric. They've already got an all electric Mustang. I don't think, that's probably one of the most powerful cars on the market right now. And they're talking about going, all electric or at least carbon neutral in their facilities by 2035. So that's huge. And, when you got large American industry giants like Ford, and GM moving in that direction, people have to sit up and take notice.
Yeah, I think that actually gets more notice than a lot of other things going on. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And people follow their favorite brands, and I see that that's happening. And I do like that at least the United States government is putting its buying power behind it. But again, Biden's executive order is just an executive order. It's not legislation. So he can sort of guide policy and say, we're going to be buying a whole bunch of electric vehicles and whatnot. And then that will sort of spur investment in that and hopefully shift the market that direction. But again, it has to be legislated.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess like many things, kind of comes down to marketing, how it's presented. I'm very fond of AOC. Unfortunately, she's not the best messenger in all circles, which is really sad because she's super smart and I think knows what's going on. But on the other hand, we need more people to. It's
nice to have at least a representative
in
that political spectrum, which previously that wasn't represented at all. I thought a great marketing thing was, I think it was a GM commercial during the Super Bowl with Will Ferrell. Have you guys seen that commercial where it's
Norway,
about the Norway,
Norway.
Norway. If you get a chance, look it up. It's Will Ferrell, and he's talking about electric vehicles, and we realize how far behind Norway we are when it comes to electric vehicles. Norway is transitioning to all electric in 2025.
Yeah, so Norway, 57% of their new automobile purchases are electric, and in the US it's like 2%. So and so that's what the of course our 2% in terms of total number of vehicles is more than Norway's 57% total number of vehicles, but the percentage is significant. And and we should have, and I think we're moving in that direction because the costs are coming down. We should see a transition in the next year or two between the cost of electric vehicles and the cost of fossil fuel vehicles. And when that happens, when electric vehicles become cheaper, I think then we're going to see a mass change happen. So I'm hopeful that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm actually on the planning committee for the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's Energy and Sustainability Summit that happens every summer. And that is one of the talks that I've asked them to incorporate was, how do you have electric vehicles be more attainable for those in a lower income bracket? And right now it's Teslas. Everyone thinks Tesla, you've got to be rich to afford a Tesla, even though their cheapest model is pretty affordable, but it's not for people who are the most affected by, diesel emissions from trucks, those disadvantaged communities that live near freeways can't afford the cheapest Tesla. That's ridiculous. So that is a talk that I've asked them to talk. They reach out to all the industry partners, and hopefully we'll get some really substantive responses.
So,
Yeah, another thing, the tax comes into play there as well, because to help promote, it's more expensive to have the hybrid and electric cars, so we need, some subsidy. So they gave it as a up to $7,500 credit to the buyer. Tesla's already run through there. Some of the more popular cars have already run through as a maximum of 200,000, then start phasing down. It was interesting. Once the credits were gone, they dropped the price of the car, which means they were certainly taking a chunk of the federal subsidy. But so far as the distribution of those, the hybrid Bentley, which costs about $160,000 plus tax, it gets a $7,500 credit, and there'll be 200,000 allocated. But why? There's just no thought. And of course, $7,500, that's more than what the maximum income tax credit you can get. So why we're giving money to people who can already afford 160,000 Bentley plus the 200,000 same allocation that there would have been to more affordable cars. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but the public has no idea what's going on. In fact, the lawmakers have no idea what's going on. They're not paying attention to, we just gave a credit to people who can afford $160,000 Bentley. And there's Porsches and other high-end cars that get these credits. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, it spurs the market, but it's not.
Yeah, and someone's not making
justice. Yeah.
Yeah, someone's not buying it when they find out to get the credit. I know it's on the Bentley. You can get the backseat technology, video and stuff for about 88,000. So it's going to market it. Hey, the government's going to buy your fancy marketing system there.
Cool.
I think if somebody wants to, there we go.
Oh, welcome.
There's Madden. Here,
Hello.
He just had school from 12 to 1 today. I don't understand all of that, but
Excellent. This is also educational. Car subsidies.
Well, he's why we're doing this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I hope so.
Exactly why we're doing that.
Yeah, I'll tell you about Earth Day.
Mhm.
Right.
Which will be
But
good.
every day should be Earth Day, right?
Every day, exactly.
Yeah.
I agree. Working on it. All right,
So it
Debbie,
is-
we're at time.
Yeah, it is 1:00. Thank you so much for doing this. I feel like we could talk forever on the topic.
I know Bill and I can. So
Yeah, I can too. But thank you. This is recorded, and we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel. So, and I will send Erin and Bill, I'll send you the link as well. But
Great.
thank you. I really appreciate it.
very informative and helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for attending, guys. I really appreciate it. You have a
Thanks,
good
everybody.
afternoon.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.